is learning and unlearning the systems and structures that we were told just were. We were told because someone said so, this is just how we practice.
It's Uncle Money time.
Everybody, this is another episode of Practice Prosperity. We have a practice and we're going to talk a lot of different things about relationships, conflict, and I think it's going to be something applicable. We're recording this during the holiday season, so a lot of things that are relevant are some of the things that we're going to talk about today. We're joined today by Meagé Clements, aka the Unbothered Therapist. So the title alone should tell you what type of episode we're getting into. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about yourself, the firm, and the type of clients that you serve.
Sure. So I am a licensed clinical social worker, wellness coach, and certified personal trainer. So I wear a lot of hats. Primarily, I'd say I started as a therapist, providing individual therapy, family therapy. And so through that, I noticed a lot of relationship challenges. So estranged family dynamics, different disconnects within family, between family members. And then through my career becoming a therapist, I noticed the gap of wellness and physical wellness. And so I started to train, becoming a trainer, got into my own weightlifting journey, and kind of have created this practice, Unbothered Psychotherapy and Wellness, where I try to combine the two as much as possible.
I like that. I like that a lot. So what were you said throughout your journey, you noticed these dynamics. What were you seeing with these dynamics to say, hey, there's an issue here that I can address?
Mm-hmm. Sure. So I worked in a practice where I was primarily doing family therapy, actually. So I would coordinate with the individual therapist, and a lot of times they would refer clients to me because they're like the parents and the young adult or the teen, they're just not getting along. Like, I don't know what I can do to make there be some more cohesion here. And so they would come to me, and a lot of times there would be these rifts of values or differing political views, sometimes differing views about just really all kinds of things, music, sometimes culture, depending on family dynamics and culture within the family. And so I learned that a lot of times there's a point at which someone can choose to want to continue that relationship, or they may choose to create more distance. And when I was working with teens, that's a little less possible for them. They're not as able, as always able to make that choice of whether they want to continue that relationship or not. And working with the young adults and older adults as I went on through my career, people were allowed to make this choice, and some noticed some peace with making a choice of creating some more rigid boundaries, some even going more no contact. And so I kind of work with individuals from all ranges of that, some that even want to maybe reintegrate with their families after a point of no contact.
That makes sense. And let's start off more on a positive note. What can parents do to limit the opportunity of rifts happening based off who you've been seeing through your practice?
Sure. So the number one skill that I teach is called validation. And I feel like it's this really powerful tool to help connect us. And we can really use this in any kind of relationship, but it's finding those kernels of truth or similarities where maybe our diverging opinions converge. And so where is a space where, maybe there is some overlap, or maybe there is we can agree to disagree respectfully, but we can also acknowledge each other's differing views. And so when there is that piece, I notice a lot of times there is more possibility for a reconciliation and moving forward. So validation, I think, is great. Listening, active listening skills, really working on strengthening that communication.
Yeah, I like it. So when we talk about family dynamics, we hear the term an estranged relationship. If you don't mind, kind of give us your definition of what an estranged relationship is and how that shows up in today.
Sure. So estranged relationships I share they can be voluntary or involuntarily. So sometimes we'll have an individual who was kind of maybe outcasted from their family. They may be the person who considers themselves to be the black sheep of the family. They may be the one that has entirely different views than the rest of their extended and maybe even immediate family. So there's some sort of disconnect that is there. And that can range, again, from anywhere from strong boundaries, like I can handle these family members in short bursts, We communicate at this frequency, and then I can also see full no contact. So there are some who maybe haven't spoken in a couple of years, decades, even in some cases, and they find that that allows them to really create more space for being themselves authentically.
When you mentioned that, sometimes families fall apart, when is it healthy
Mhm.
in your experience for a family member to take a step back from their loved ones for their own self-care?
Sure. So it's hard to answer because I think it can be so individual. I'll say generally, I do try to encourage clients to acknowledge their personal limits. And so that may be that they've really pushed for change 10, 20 times and notice they keep hitting a wall with that other person. So maybe they're working towards change and the other person is not willing to participate in that process yet. And so we keep hitting these roadblocks, and maybe they've done that 20 times, and at the 21st time they're like, I'm over this. And so I really encourage them to acknowledge their limits of when they start to feel and to pay attention to their bodies as well. What are they noticing in their body as they go to communicate with this family member? What are they noticing in the thoughts as they go to communicate or even leave interactions with the family member? And so I really encourage them to kind of, to acknowledge that limit, that personal, I guess, threshold for those relationships, and also to assess whether a person's reinforcing closeness or distance with them. So I do work with a lot of attachment-based trauma, so we could be avoidant or we can be anxious in how we attach to other individuals. And we want to be assessing whether a person is actually doing things that are reinforcing and supporting a healthy relationship with us, or are they actively doing things that are actually creating more distance and more of that like polarization and pulling away?
Understood. If somebody decides, hey, I want to take a step back from a loved one, a family member, we know that's not like a magic pill. When you take a step back from somebody, what are the emotions that they're going to be faced with, knowing that they're not having that relationship any longer?
Sure, sure. And yeah, we're speaking during the holiday season, so I'm seeing a lot of grief, a lot of loneliness, a lot of maybe even self-gaslighting. Like, did I make the right choice? Or maybe I am, whatever adjective was kind of running in their mind as they were taking that space. So I see a lot of the negative cognition showing up for individuals sometimes, and we really work towards finding the space of, where do those negative cognitions come from? Where are they stemming from? What are the goals and hopes for some of those thoughts? As well as what are their long-term goals for family. So I never tell an individual they should or shouldn't be in a relationship with someone. I really allow them, encourage them to make that own choice, their own choice there. But there is a space where it's really important for us to think about, is our goal long-term estrangement or long-term no contact? Are we working towards maybe bettering ourselves, strengthening our skills to be able to have a healthy relationship in the future?
You said something that I haven't heard before. You said self-gaslighting. Help
Mm.
us understand what that really means.
Sure, sure. So I think you'll see a lot of these videos sometimes on social media where they'll say statements like, "Oh, well, I must be the crazy one," or I'm probably like missing something here. And so it's kind of a self-doubt, but I'd say it's even maybe a more powerful and kind of version of self-doubt that is like all-consuming because it'll have us question how we live our lives. Individuals who are building relationships, romantic relationships with others, find that they have struggles with trusting themselves, and really deciding, is this a healthy partner? Am I creating a cycle here? Am I repeating a cycle? And there's a lot of that just questioning who an individual is potentially, maybe their own identities. Are they skillful enough? Are they strong enough? All of these kinds of self-doubts that really influence how they live their lives.
I've been out of the dating scene for a while, and there's something that is kind of propped up. I hear from my friends, it's ghosting, which is a kind
Mm,
of avoidance, a kind of a separation. Like, kind of
yeah.
explain this new ghosting culture. Do you think it's
Mm.
healthy? Like, when can it be healthy? When can it be healthy? Elaborate on what you're seeing.
Sure, sure. So I see all over the spectrum. I have some, individuals who have full-on ghosted family members or even romantic partners. And we talk about like why that is. Is the ghosting coming from a place of it was actually safer to do that, safer to kind of fade into the background, maybe physical safety, emotional safety, for them, or was it more avoidance of like maybe I'm a people pleaser and I just struggle with having those kind of conversations. So if we're more on the people pleasing side, I do try to encourage working towards having those conversations where we can be assertive, really setting those boundaries, really communicating the boundary or the decision with others. We see a lot where there is this culture of kind of being aloof in dating where it's like, oh, well, I'm going to act like I don't care about this person really. And I'm just going to, just stop texting them. I'm going to block them and that'll be it. But a lot of times, what ends up happening, people may be on the receiving end of that and have all kinds of questions about, okay, what did I do or what happened? Did I miss something? And then it kind of further perpetuates that gaslighting experience occasionally. So I do try to encourage some form of communication if it's safe to do so. Um, but again, all of it goes back to that personal choice. If a person sees, I guess, value in ghosting or fading into the background without a conversation, it's safe for them to do so and doesn't create any long-term consequences. That may be the best choice, which is probably a controversial take because everyone's like, yeah, don't ghost. It's not nice, it's not kind. I can see various scenarios, without giving confidential information where ghosting was actually the safer choice because if they did say maybe a formal breakup or rift, there could have been physical harm. Um, and for others, again, that avoidance piece, if it's coming from a people-pleasing space, I do try to encourage more of that assertiveness. And there is no easy way to break up with someone or to end a relationship. And so I do really validate that it's not just I say it and that's it. Like maybe there are several conversations or some follow-ups that have to happen. And so we really cope ahead and really build our toolkit to be able to approach those.
Yeah. Let's say that I'm on the receiving end of somebody ghosting me.
Mhm.
How should I process those emotions? What if I can't clearly identify maybe where I went wrong, maybe where I've
Mhm.
misstepped? How should somebody think about being ghosted in this day and age?
Sure, sure. So it is definitely tough being on the receiving end. And I think a lot of times what I try to encourage in that processing is to maybe accept that we may not get the answers. And so we are all of us, I think, are comfortable with having some sort of explanation for everything, for how we behave, how we show up, why a relationship ended, why a person did this or that. There are a lot of instances where we actually don't ever get an answer, and we may not ever get an answer. So we do try to work towards what's called acceptance, not approval, or I teach a skill called radical acceptance, which is kind of an extreme version of acceptance with our mind, body, soul, kind of our full being. Um, and through that process, we are not approving, we're not saying it's okay, or we're not being permissive of any actions. It's more um, I want to get to as close to a sense of peace as possible with what's happened. And so, what are the narratives that are serving me here? If I can reflect on my own actions and say, hey, maybe this is one part of that, and maybe there are things that happen that I won't be privy to, like how can I hold space for both ands, that self accountability as well as not falling into like a self-blaming narrative.
Okay. So you have introduced in your life, personal training,
Mm-hmm.
and then you are also applying that to your therapy. And I think that goes along with Unbothered. Kind of explain that journey and how you're infusing that with how you help clients.
Sure, sure. So I practice from what's called a decolonized therapy lens. And so that is really challenging the ways in which I was taught in grad school. And so in graduate school, we're taught that you have this one role, that's a therapist. You don't dabble in these other spaces, you don't combine things. And there definitely still are ethical limitations that I have to respect even today in running my practice with those roles. But I've realized that therapy and talk therapy can be great for some individuals. Some really like that. However, bringing in more of the somatic or body has been really life changing for a lot of my clients. and even myself as a therapy client myself, and in my own personal training and training journey as a client and personal training. And so I really noticed how that actually supported me in relationship-based trauma that I've experienced, and going to the gym and doing weightlifting actually helped me feel my body, because a lot of us dissociate through life. We're kind of on an autopilot all of the time, and so we don't notice, oh, like that actually not in my stomach means something, and what's behind that, or those butterflies in my chest, maybe that's connected to something. And so weightlifting is not something that you can do mindlessly, because it's dangerous too. You have to, be somewhat present in your body through that process. And so I noticed the integration of some of that in my own wellness journey. And even as I was working with clients, some of them felt like that was something that they were missing as well. And so all of that experience kind of combined to be this integrated, holistic wellness space in Unbothered Psychotherapy and Wellness, a space where we can be unapologetically us, where we can combine different parts of us without feeling like we have to abide by a societal standard or any sort of because we were told so kind of narratives. A lot of what we were taught in grad school are like because somebody said so at some point. And so I've learned to be in a place in my practice where I question that. Where does that come from? Is that actually serving of the communities that I work with, which are mostly BIPOC and LGBTQIA plus individuals?
So I go to the gym a lot, and I interact with a lot of trainers, and they say, Randall,
Hmm.
people open up to me while we're
Hmm.
working out.
Yeah.
What is that? Is it the escapism? Like, and is that kind of what you're alluding to as well? If
Hmm.
us sitting down looking face to face, I may only open up so much, but if I'm exhausted, perspirating, have my endorphins going, I really feel like open up. Kind of explain what that
Hmm.
is, if you can.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, so there's definitely a lot of release that can come from physical movement. And being a Black woman myself and working with a lot of, speaking more towards the Black community, a lot of us are not actively seeking out therapy all of the time. And so I think that there sometimes is a missing space where there could be healing in these other spaces, and we really don't think of them in that way. And I think the gym definitely is a space where people really open up, really can feel their emotions, can have these different releases of trauma in the body and all kinds of really healing experiences. And so I incorporate the wellness coaching slash personal training, because there are some people that I'll never reach through therapy because of that stigma, because of access, underinsured people, or people who can't afford to seek out therapy, or people who, feel they shouldn't for whatever reasons, might be more inclined to find spaces like the gym or wellness spaces, support groups, workshops, kind of things to support their healing.
I like that. It's kind of like you're going to where the people are actually going to versus
Hmm.
expecting them to come to you in this, boxed form,
Right.
which we
Right.
provide therapy. And this is practice prosperity. So, how did you actually develop the services? Part of being an entrepreneur is that you decide what you offer, how you offer, the frequency, the intensity. Explain that journey, especially now that you're
Mhm.
incorporating some of the physical elements.
Sure, sure. So I say that I've had the blessing and the curse of being a job hopper in my career. And so I've worked at a lot of different places, some that have been really great, some not so much. And I think through that journey, I've learned a lot of tools that have been helpful for how I wanted my practice to look. What kind of leader I wanted to be if I ever were to have something like a group practice, what kind of policies I wanted to have, how I wanted the client experience to look like. And so I think that journey and the several jobs that I've worked in have really helped shape the vision that I have for this practice. And so pretty early on, I'm wrapping up my first full year, and so I'd say it's an ongoing journey where I am figuring out, what works, what doesn't work, and what aligns with my values, what's actually helpful for the clients that I'm working with. And so I did know that I always wanted to start my practice. So I had my LLC probably about a year, maybe two, before I started my practice. And I was like, I'm just gonna, keep working at these other practices, build up my savings and things, and so that way when I start, I'll be able to like hit the ground running. And I ended up doing a slower transition because of fear, and so I worked at other practices and was working part-time there and part-time in my practice, and so through that experience, I think I was able to even see even clearly a comparison between the places that I was working and how I was building my practice, and still noticing some of those cracks and things that I wanted to eliminate in my own business and not really have be a part of that journey.
Mhm.
And I think that some of the things come together naturally as well. So some of the trainings that I've been to, one type of therapy I use is called EMDR, or eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy. And it's a therapy that's primarily for trauma, but really can be used for a lot of different challenges. And that incorporates the body. And then, taking that training kind of catapulted into what if someone doesn't want to do eye movements or tapping, and maybe they feel like that's, weird, or they don't, believe that that's a type of therapy that will work for them. And so thinking more practical tools like weightlifting, moving our body, stretching. I've had some great colleagues who also incorporate like yoga therapy into their practices, and seeing and witnessing some of the healing that some of their clients have had, and some of the clients I've been able to work with up to this point really affirmed that I was combining, I think, two really great things together. And the ways in which I was approaching it were kind of creating and increasing more access to people that wouldn't otherwise seek services.
For my clarification, are in your sessions, are you really pulling out a yoga mat, have weights? Are you going to the gym with your
Mhm,
clients? Like, what does it look like on a day in and day out
mhm.
basis?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and that's where there are some limitations per ethics. So because my clinical license and my therapy license are two separate entities, there are some limitations to how that can look. So I do not have the space yet where I'm doing like weightlifting therapy with individuals. So that's a goal to see, how that can be combined ethically. Right now, I'm primarily virtual, so it looks like I'm kind of on camera with the client, and they may have some like light dumbbells in their space. And so as they're doing trauma processing, there might be things like they're doing kind of light lateral raises, so kind of arms swaying side to side. I've had some that are doing stretches, or if there's a need to express some anger, and they have some sort of ball or pillow, we'll do kind of like the med ball slams. And so I incorporate some of that movement into my practice a bit, where they'll do movements that just feel comfortable and accessible to them, because the gym, and I could go on a whole tangent about this, is not always a safe place for everybody. I do work with a lot of individuals with different gender identities, and so they may not always feel safe in a commercial gym space. And so we find things that they can do in their home, and we build like strategies for creating sustainable habits and systems for themselves so that they can incorporate movement on a regular basis in a way that is accessible and kind of easy for them. And so I do therapy, and then we kind of add the wellness piece sometimes. And then I have clients that are kind of on either end, depending on how they found me. Um, and so, yeah, I am working towards more integration over time, and just kind of figuring out how to do that ethically, of course, because there are, with the ethics in my license, there are a some limitations there of, not having dual relationships and really being strategic and mindful about kind of how we're doing the treatment.
That's interesting. So, and of course, I have to think about, how you receive income from these things.
Mhm,
Are there some people paying for therapy? Are there some people paying for physical therapy or
mhm,
training? And is
mhm,
there a hybrid at times where some people are
mhm.
using insurance and then paying self-pay for the physical element? Like, how do you think about that?
Yeah, so there's some integration there, and then there are some entirely separate. So as of right now, I do have two different funnels that clients kind of go through. So I have the therapy funnel, which are usually through like therapy directories, some word of mouth. referrals that I'll get, the therapy website. And so they're usually intentional about seeking therapy, and they know that they want therapy for trauma or support with estranged relationships or relationship-based trauma, usually are my main focuses. And so they go through that avenue. And so those individuals are private pay or insurance. And so they're able to choose whatever works best for them and whatever insurance plans that I'm in network with. And then the wellness coaching personal training side is a separate funnel that those individuals are usually looking more for sustainability in habits. So they may already be working with a therapist, or maybe they're not interested in therapy. And they're looking more for how do I create body inclusive wellness habits for themselves that can actually stick. And so they're looking for more accountability. They're looking for maybe programming and wellness. And then I have workshops that kind of combine the two. So those audiences are usually kind of from different avenues and both potentially. So there is some converging there that does happen.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
You've been on this entrepreneur journey for about a year. How would you
Mm-hmm.
advise somebody thinking about going to business for themselves in the therapy business?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what are some things you recommend they have in place now that you have been in it for about a year?
Yeah, definitely. So I would say to not be hyper independent. Speaking to myself as well, I am someone who's like, I can do it, I can figure it out. There's Google, there's this. And I think there were some mistakes that were made because of that. And so I'm grateful that I eventually invested in and started working with coaches and mentors, and really asking people that, already have done the process so that I don't have to reinvent things and figure out things from scratch. And so I've been able to work with some amazing coaches, mentors, even peer mentors. So people who are building their practice around the same time that I am. And we kind of are able to bounce ideas off of each other. I'm able to fact check things, ask for resources. And so that's been really, really helpful in me trying to not, be able to rely on others and, practice what I preach. And that community is a huge part of my practice as well. How do we find our people if they aren't in our family or if they aren't from a partner or relationship? And so I try to do the same, both career-wise and in my personal life. And so in the career space, I do really actively and pretty much since I've started have, or shortly after I started and kind of made some flops in the process. I connected with coaches and consultants on different areas. And so I've been lucky to work with some on the therapy side, some on the training side, and then some that actually do combine both and are therapists and personal trainers. And I'm so surprised to see that there's, actually quite a few of us out here. And it was never something that I thought, I thought I'm going to be this outlier and I'm going to be so isolated. And so it's been nice to really see that there are other people doing this, having success with it, and are doing it in a way that aligns with my values and how I want to show up.
I like that. How would you advise somebody get a mentor in this space? Like, where should they be looking? How should they approach them? What have you found to be successful in your journey?
Sure. So I am no longer afraid. There was a point in time where I was like, I'm not sliding in anybody's LinkedIn DMs or anything. But I think that that's becoming more commonplace where people are connecting on LinkedIn and reaching out. And so I'll encourage doing that. And that's something I've done as well, or searching up people in a similar career space, or doing some of the things that I want to do. And I'll connect with them on LinkedIn and send a message. I'm in a couple of therapy groups on Facebook, and recently joined a Mighty Network community where I am able to connect with people in those spaces. And so there's some kind of created spaces that really encourage that. Posting in some of the groups saying, hey, I'm looking to speak with someone about this, or looking to pick someone's brain on this topic. And that's been really helpful. I've also been in some group coaching spaces where there have been just other clinicians there, and that's those have been people that I've been able to connect to for referrals, for just kind of commiserating on how hard it is having a business sometimes, and just being able to really speak to them in ways that aren't always, I guess money focused, or like who can bring in a client or vice versa.
Makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So, like I said, as an entrepreneur, you get to decide the services that you provide, but you
Hmm.
also get to decide how you price these things. Kind of
Hmm.
explain your pricing journey and how do you see your pricing evolving toward in the future?
Sure, sure. So that's an ongoing journey, definitely. And I think even in speaking with mentors, that's something for them as well. And I work with a lot of mentors who are also Black women. And so just our relationships with money, individually can look different ways. And so I know that I do struggle with pricing a bit and saying like, oh, okay, I want to charge this like premium price. And so I think that brings in imposter syndrome and some of these thoughts of like, oh, but people aren't going to actually pay that. And then I'll see, people that are pricing things probably 3 or 4 times what I would put them as and are doing very well. And so I definitely find I'm in this conflicted space sometimes with how I navigate pricing. Right now, things are priced in a way that are supportive of my current lifestyle. And so being able to make sure that my needs are met so that I can actually fully show up in these sessions and not show up from a space of like, am I going to have to shut down because I can't afford to sustain the practice or anything? So currently, they're more of a functional need, the way that pricing is structured. Um, I do have goals to reconsider things like insurance and pricing down the line. I mentioned earlier insurance, and part of the reason why there are some limitations to treatment, or that insurance can dictate frequency of sessions sometimes, how long they'll cover sessions, as well as it does impact reimbursement that we'll receive for each session. So there are some barriers with that occasionally that I've run into. And so I think a long-term goal of mine is to reconsider my my business relationship with insurance and how I'll, plan to remain accessible while also being mindful of some of the limitations that really do kind of impact how I want to show up in this space.
I see this with a lot of therapists. They have to
Hmm.
balance, wanting making a good income and also
Hmm.
accessibility. Speak on that. I think you said you
Hmm.
target the biopic population.
Hmm.
How are you thinking about that as you're moving on in your journey? As far as well, if I charge more, don't take insurance, it could limit so the population versus well, if they prioritize it, they will pay for it. Like, how do you think about those things?
Sure. And this is something actually coaches and mentors have shared with me, which I'm really grateful for their support here, has been that there are other ways to be accessible. And so I think my idea going in were only one-to-one services where that access and those had to be priced a certain way so that people would be more inclined to seek out those services. And so I've learned that there's actually other ways of being accessible. So I do show up a little bit on social media, and not that we can say social media completely replaces therapy, but there are some messages and communities that can be built in that space that I think are really accessible to people, even in other countries or places where I'm not licensed. So that is one way that I try to remain accessible. I do also offer like free workshops and things too, where people can participate and attend those. So that way they're able to learn some of the messaging and learn some of the tools without that full commitment to therapy. Um, I think from a standpoint of, yes, thinking long term, I do intend to keep those services in place. I do intend to also be able to create space for some equitable pricing models. And so with that, there's a bit of balance where people with more privilege may be able to pay more and kind of support that pricing model a bit further. As well as being able to challenge just my own thinking surrounding money and self-worth of like we can, put this price tag on something and it doesn't automatically mean that we won't attract our client population. I, work with a lot of coaches, mentors who work with the same population I do and are fully private pay and, don't have any issue in that department.
Interesting. Interesting. One thing that you introduced is the they call it the freemium model, so things that you do
Mhm.
for free. How do
Mhm.
you think about that as far as the balance of effectiveness the balance of the
Mm-hmm.
time being used is actually going to grow my business long term. Then
Mm-hmm.
there's the other aspect of just goodwill. Like this is, I cannot serve everybody, but I do want to touch as many people as possible. How do you think about that balance in your freemium models?
Definitely. Yeah, I like the word balance in that too, because I think my initial thought is like, okay, I'll have all of these be free. And then that isn't sustainable for business because there is not only emotional labor that goes into creating this, but even logistics and systems that have to be set up to have these go well and to be able to provide these. And so I do, and even in planning my goals for 2025 are really being intentional about the balance in this next year of business. And so, not having everything be a free service or an equitable pricing model, but some being the price, just that they are. And then others being free for those who may not be able to participate in those other offerings. And so that aligns with, I think, my value of being able to be accessible and to have some balance in the services that I'm providing. So I have kind of things broken down a little bit more for 2025 to be a little bit more intentional about that.
So in your profession, just like my professions, there's licensures, there's standards, there's boards. But you
Mhm.
mentioned something called decolonizing therapy.
Mhm.
Elaborate on that a little bit more because sometimes we don't realize because we are held to these standards, because we're supposed to practice in certain ways, it could limit
Mhm.
things. So elaborate more
Yeah.
on decolonization, really in a lot of professions.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's definitely Decolonizing Therapy is a great book where I've been learning a lot by Dr. Jennifer Mullen. And so that book, I'm learning a lot of challenging things that I actually never really questioned because they were taught as the history in grad school. And these were the, quote unquote, founding fathers of psychology, and learning that actually a lot of those practices were indigenous practices or practices that were actually created by BIPOC individuals and kind of have been changed and labeled as these different modalities or different acronyms. And so I think in a short way to, I guess, to define like the decolonizing therapy is learning and unlearning the systems and structures that we were told just were. We were told because someone said so, this is just how we practice, or because these are the risks, this is just what you do. Um, and so learning to question those things. And I think there's also a space of learning to be vulnerable enough to call ourselves out and saying that, oh, like I probably did do something that was actually harmful to clients in this way, or this isn't something that actually is supportive of building a relationship with a client in a healthy way. This is a sterile way of building maybe a white coat client relationship. And so learning to really call ourselves out of like I was doing things, I wouldn't say wrong, but I guess doing things in a way that support colonization and really strip away some of the essence of these original practices that were indigenous.
I agree. Like there are systems in place to
Hmm.
profit the let's call it the incumbents.
Hmm.
So that's why a lot of professions take insurance. It's a lot of why
Yeah.
professions are done in blocked sessions,
Mm-hmm.
industrialized. So that's interesting. So what are some of the key tools you're using to kind of think outside the box and manage the risk as well?
Sure. Yeah. I think first and foremost, I think I tried to show up more as myself because there was a point in my career where I was very much the white coat therapist. And it actually, I had an amazing client who's given me permission to share this story because I share it all the time. But they shared with me that I think in one session that they were a bit uncomfortable like opening up because I was always like poker face, showed no emotion. I think at the time I still kind of wear dark colors, but I would always wear black. And just there was never anything out of place. I think I would used to wear my hair in this like tight bun back or would have my hair straight. And so there was never a um, to them, it was like speaking to a robot. They described it in
Mhm.
that way. And they're like, I really can't open up. And part of me at first was like, oh, that really hurt my feelings. But then I had to take a step back. And I think this connects to decolonizing therapy to say, like, oh, actually, yeah, I could see why that wouldn't work. If I was in your shoes as well, I don't think I would open up too much, and can reflect on times that I've worked with therapists and haven't opened up for that reason. And so I think that lesson has come with me a long way of there is a way to have a relationship with a client that is still rooted in boundaries. And so I'm not, friends with clients, even if there are clients I'm working with that I could see myself being friends with. So there still are those boundaries that I am ethically, keeping in place. There aren't dual relationships where maybe I'm, a client is a client and then also maybe serving this role of like being a hairdresser or something like that. So there are definitely some separations there. That I think decolonizing therapy is kind of working towards demystifying some of those as well. But I'm in a space where I do really keep those boundaries pretty separate and rigid there. And so that helps minimize risk. I think also thinking about the ways in which I practice foster more honesty from clients. And so I'm able to assess, say, like safety risk with clients, I think a lot more accurately than I would have in the past because I was following this, really checklist of things that wasn't from a very human perspective. It was just like, okay, well, how do I get, really my need met, at the end of the session? And it's not about me, right? It's about that client. It's about them really feeling like they can open up in that space and can get their needs met out of that therapeutic relationship.
I know in my world, they say a client won't listen to you unless they know that you care. And
Yeah.
showing
Hmm.
that you care could be a lot of different things. But like I said, showing up, being present is a good start. I like that a lot.
Hmm.
So you have this, I feel like, is a unique practice. How are you gaining clients? Like, what have you found that is bringing people in, attracting them to the services that you're providing?
Sure. So it always changes and shifts, and I have a bit of a tracking system on my initial inquiries, at least through my website, where I'm asking them how they found me, and then I think I even ask again in my like initial intake paperwork packet, just to see kind of consistencies there, to see how they really came in to find me really on either side, so wellness coaching, personal training, or on therapy side. And so I noticed there that a lot of it recently is word of mouth. And so clients have had positive experiences, maybe clients from the past that are circling back around and wanting to restart. I think also I am on a couple of directories that are specific to my niche. So I'm in one called Inclusive Therapists, and then one Therapy for Black Girls. And so those kind of attract my client populations. And so I get a good chunk of clients from those spaces. And then aside from that, I'm actively working towards improving like my SEO on my website. So making sure that that's more searchable and those terms are accessible on the website. Um, and then meeting people. I think a lot of networking. I'm an introvert, so I'm definitely someone that's like, I'll keep my little circle that I have. But I've been branching out and meeting people in a lot of different spaces, meeting other trainers, other wellness coaches, people that do both. And those have also been some avenues for connecting me to people in this industry.
As an introvert, when you go out
Mhm.
and meet people, it drains you of your energy. So how have
Yes.
you strategized getting out there, shaking hands, but not coming back and, going down with the flu because your immune
Mm,
system's down?
right.
What has been your strategy?
Definitely. Yeah. So I think I'm tend to operate from extremes, so I'm kind of a all or nothing sometimes. So I think I was doing it a little bit too hard at first.
Yeah.
And so I realized like, okay, that's kind of outside of my limits. I don't need to meet 20 people every week. Like I think there's also something about nurturing relationships that are already built as well. And so sometimes that outreach is checking back in with someone I haven't spoken to in a while or reaching back out to, say, a psychiatrist who has referred to me in the past or someone that we've kind of referred to each other. and just really nurturing some of those relationships. So I find that balance because I think why I'm drawn to being a therapist in this way and doing some of the one-on-one work is that I really like more intimate connections and relationships. And so really fostering those one-on-ones with people that I'm meeting through networking. I do also try to set a limit on like how much of that I do each week and each season. So I think being the holidays and a lot of people in the wellness space and both ends are really swamped right now. And so I've been really mindful of like their bandwidth as well. And so not doing a whole bunch currently. I assume that some of it will pick back up in the new year.
Makes sense. I think one key thing you said is nurture relationships. So I think a lot of people forget
Mhm.
about. They think an exchange of cards, maybe one email
Yeah.
saying hi, it was nice to meet you is enough. But no, you have to
Hmm.
massage just like you massage your family, your romantic relationships. Talk about the
Hmm.
type of massaging that you do that you've found successful.
Yeah, definitely. So I think and this is something I do, I think, with therapy clients and at networking is always going back to that like authenticity and transparency. And so I know that a lot of us don't like, someone, I don't know, falls off the face of the earth and then reaches back out 6 months later, like nothing's happened.
Mhm.
And so I usually take accountability and, say, hey, I, really meant to reach back out to you. X, Y, and Z were happening. And so kind of sharing a bit about, what is going on there. And,
Mhm.
that looks a little bit different with clients versus like networking relationships. But really being authentic in terms of, maybe why there was some distance if I didn't reach out. And making sure that we're also building, I think, a human connection is important. And so we are not these productivity robots either. And so there's life happening. There are life events, there are events in the world happening that can impact how we show up in, these networking relationships too. So I hold space for all of that, I think, and that really helps people connect, I think, and for me to connect with others. I also really try to sort of, if kind of build connection off the basis of like values too. And so
Mhm. Okay.
I connect with a lot of individuals that practice similar way that I do, practice from a on the wellness coaching like anti-diet, body inclusive space where it's not all about aesthetics all the time. And and with other therapists, I think it's more of those that are more from the decolonizing therapy space and are challenging and open to that feedback from clients and from peers.
I think a lot of people miss that networking should be around things you value and enjoy.
Hmm.
People think you have to go to this stuffy association event, but it's hard to find a genuine connection there. It
Right.
happens, but it's just, you already screened out people through what you like. You
Hmm.
mentioned that, I spend a little time on social media. How
Hmm.
have you leveraged that? What have you seen the results from it? What's going on with you on social media given your business?
Sure. So I used to be someone that was like not fully anti-social media, but was like, you may have seen me have one post or one story every couple of months. And so I think it has still been a learning journey where I'm trying to show up a little bit more and just thinking to the research and the client population, age range that I work with, they're primarily on the social media platforms. So for me, more so Instagram and TikTok. And so I've been primarily on those spaces a bit more. And so with the two, I think they kind of show up a little bit differently, where Instagram's for me a bit more psychoeducational, so tips, strategies, and more on the front of, these are some helpful skills for navigating family estrangement, or I think I've had posts around navigating estrangement around like the election results and
Mhm.
things like that. And so I've also on the TikTok side, it's been more community, I'll say. So a lot more me talking and then people responding and kind of connecting to different messages there. So a couple that I think have gotten more traction have been around estranged family relationships. One was on um, sibling trauma actually, and like sibling estrangement, which we don't often talk about. The fact that, someone is estranged from maybe their older sibling for various reasons. And so I think those posts allow people to connect on maybe a more, I guess, somewhat personal level or more human connection, versus Instagram for me is a little bit more psychoeducational slash like marketing.
Gotcha. I gotcha. And what results have you found from these mediums?
Sure. So I think there have been some client outreach from both. So I have clients that I worked with that have come from both avenues. I think also networking connections. So I think a lot of, now that I think about it too, a lot of the therapists that I've connected with for networking purposes, also we find each other on social media and we connect and maybe support each other's content. Um, and so it's been, I think, just as much a community piece for me as it is for a lot of people who join social media to connect with others, to get access to maybe community that's outside of their like immediate vicinity.
You mentioned that you like to show up authentically to
Mhm.
your clients. For any professional, give some advice on how you can be authentic, how you can show up as your true self that actually provides results with clients.
Sure, sure. So something I practice and really encourage is checking with our body and our system. And so in reflecting on those days where I was that white coat therapist, I was leaving work so drained and exhausted. There was no space left for social interaction in my personal life or anything else. So it was kind of a work, repeat cycle. And so I think noticing my body really helped to say like, okay, I'm actually physically tired, showing up in this way. And as I've shifted in the space of being unbothered, being the unbothered therapist, and just really leaning into who I am, I feel more energized, I think, post sessions and just post any interaction, even networking ones, where I didn't feel like I was masking the whole time. And, being a Black woman, there's probably still some spaces where that is showing up and, actively working towards some of that in those spaces. But I think there is definitely a shift that we'll notice with our body and our energy, fulfillment, even I think satisfaction with the work that we do if we are showing up more as ourselves. And I try to not copy and paste because of, in professional relationships, there's still those boundaries, but to think of like, how do I show up with friends? My, closest friends are going to know who I am, a bit. And so it isn't exactly fair for me to expect this client to, pour out their heart and soul when they know nothing about me. And so I try to create a space that's pretty open where, they can ask questions. And if I'm comfortable answering, I will. And to really challenge, like if there's something that I feel the need to mask around or not share, really why is that and where does that come from?
Okay. So any professional business, especially one-on-one, providing one-on-one services, there's three areas of focus. You could be the best at what you do, provide great customer service,
Mm-hmm.
or get the task done with great reliability. Of course, you
Mm.
want to be the best at all of those, but out of those three, which one do you leverage, and how do you present that to a client that this is a valuable thing they should want?
Yeah, that's a tough one because I agree all of them. But I think I would say I probably value the most the client experience and like the customer service experience there. And so what is that satisfaction looking like? I never want to be that person that someone works with on therapy, wellness coaching, or training that turns them off of that completely. So I want them to feel like they, even if we're not a good fit and they end up moving on to someone else, I want them to feel like they got something out of that work and that they are leaving, somewhat satisfied with the interaction that we had. And that starts from, initial outreach, like how do they, before we even meet face to face or speaking on the phone, on the websites, like are they feeling comfortable? Are they receiving those messages well? And so really prioritizing kind of how the people that I'm working with are feeling post our work together, I think is really the most important for me.
I like that. Because you're out on your own, there's nobody giving you a curriculum of things you should know, conferences
Hmm.
you should go to. You have to create that for yourself. How are you
Right.
able to keep your skills up to date, and,
Mhm.
and providing the best to enable you to provide the best services?
Sure, sure. So I have the benefit of being what's called a messy perfectionist. So I always like to do a lot of things and learn a lot of things. Not always the best for follow through, I think sometimes, which are why mentors and coaches are helpful to say, like, Meagé, actually, you need to finish that project first. So that's helpful to have some of that. But in both fields, the training, wellness coaching, therapy, I do take CEUs or continuing education credits. So there's those requirements to continue to build our skill set. And I try to be intentional about the things that I'm learning. So in the next year, taking trainings on different modalities that align with the trauma work that I'm doing or align with more of a mind body connection type of vibe to the work. And so on both ends, I'm seeing a lot more trainings on both that are kind of integrating. So there's some around trauma informed weightlifting, trauma informed yoga. And so I try to find, different trainings that connect to really the vision that I have for my practice and align with what, again, going back to that client experience, what will help those individuals I work with feel like their needs are being met out of these sessions.
Very good. I like that. So I'm assuming that while you're talking to clients, sometimes
Mhm.
finances come up.
Mhm.
Um, Based on what you're hearing, what are some areas that a financial professional, financial planner could step in to help clients? Like, what are we not
Mhm.
providing the people that you serve as far as financial literacy?
Or yeah, Um, I think sometimes the different industries, there's a lot of like separation and a lot of times, trauma and family estrangement connect to financial trauma, or maybe even not being the most educated on, finances and what things are supposed to be in place to support their financial well-being. And so I think some like maybe an intersectional approach of realizing that it's not always a completely separate issue or separate goal. It may connect to their mood or, yeah, their family relationships, privileges they have or don't have potentially can impact that. Um, I think I see often too a lot of really just like ignorance, I think, around finances. So just not having family members that have retirement, or who have different, investment portfolios and things. And so these are sometimes new territories for individuals, and there might be some shame in bringing that up and say, hey, actually, I don't know what investing is, or I don't know what a 401(k) is. I don't know what this is. And so I think approaching those conversations sensitively so that people, don't feel judged or feel like they can really approach those conversations fully, honestly.
Now, you network with a lot of therapists. For as far as therapy practice owners, how do you think financial
Mhm.
planners can serve that population well, given the things that y'all go
Mhm.
through on a day in and day out basis?
Yeah. So I know, speaking, I guess, more for myself, not someone who's the most like business oriented. So I think it's helpful to have some of those. I guess what kind of I call like a wise mind check or, a check of like, okay, yeah, logically and emotionally we need the two to work together. And so this is how it makes sense in a business structure or, in building that financial portfolio. And so I think knowledge and working with individuals who may not be the most, I guess, financially oriented or business oriented. I think too, just again, I think a lot goes to that intersectionality of a lot of us as therapists are also experiencing or have experienced the same things that our clients have. And so, similar things with mood, experiences of trauma. Impact how we all also approach finances, pricing, and just all of the different like parts of owning a business, I think are definitely impacted by like our lived experiences and, our history.
So, what's next on your journey? And if you look at yourself
Mhm.
5, 10 years from now, where do you want to be?
Yeah, so I definitely want to continue to build more community spaces. So I think my long-term goal has always been to have this like wellness center, wellness space where there is more like specialized kind of holistic wellness. And so someone being able to, get their mental health support, but also get in some movement and maybe also speak to, their doctor and fully haven't thought out like how that looks logistically. I think that's a far distant goal. More in the short term, I guess 3 to 5 are really settling into this space of business ownership. And so I think settling into like how I want that to look for me, especially going into kind of full year 2 in 2025. And so I think, how I want to navigate maybe difficult financial conversations with clients or even with like strategic partners, people that reach out to collaborate on different things. I want to increase more access to different things. So, working on currently some efforts around like courses. And so, different offerings that people can access really on demand. And so it's not tied to when I can have this workshop or when I can show up here, or when I have spaces open in my caseload. And so, yeah, I think I want to really lean further into the space of the unbothered therapist, the services that I want to have that really prioritize that holistic wellness journey.
Like that. So we talked about your business, but what about personally? What does being, financially well off, what does that look like for you personally?
Sure. So I think that looks like me being able to have the quality of life that I want to have. And so I didn't grow up from, super well-off family. Recently, actually didn't till recently travel out of the country and realized that I really like to do that. And so I think I do want to be able to explore, to be able to travel and, to be able to do that comfortably. So having enough, finances and things to be able to make that happen. I also want to be able to create generational wealth. And so, I'm not someone currently with children. That is a goal, and so being able to support, not only my family, my niece, nephew, cousins, and really support kind of creating this sense of intergenerational wealth that I think wasn't something that I experienced, but want to be able to kind of break that cycle.
I like it. Well, thank you very much for joining us for Practice
Yeah.
Prosperity. We have Meagé Clements, aka the Unbothered Therapist.
Yeah.
If anybody's listening to this and say, I really like what she's saying, I want to connect with her, I may want to use her for therapy, how can they connect with you?
Sure. So my primary modality of communicating is going to be through my website at unbotheredtherapy.com. You can go through my contact form. I can also be reached through social media. So I'm on TikTok and Instagram at the Unbothered Therapist.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's been great.
If you've been inspired to leverage your practice to create financial freedom, please schedule a consultation with Diesel Wealth Management. The legacy you dreamed of is a 15-minute phone call away from becoming a reality.
The more I know, the more money I can make.